How's it going, everybody? I am Jason of Jason's Realm here, and today I am here bringing you guys our NFL Week 15 recap video. Now, I do apologize about this getting out a little late. Things have been crazy with work. They called me in Sunday. I didn't get out of there until like 11:30. Got home, had to crash, and get back there at 11 a.m. on Monday. So I do apologize about this getting out late, but I will make sure it gets out on Tuesday at the very least. But I guess we will just go ahead and dive right into this. So we'll start off with Thursday Night Football between the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. The Niners winning this one 21-13, and they came out to an early lead, and they were strong, but then they let Seattle back in it towards the end, and it was close. Seattle almost came back and won it, but overall, San Francisco was able to win and clinch the NFC West despite the poor showing. We'll see what they can do. Right now, they're fighting for that 3 seed. I don't think they can win the 1 seed right now. Let me actually double check. But I don't think, because they can't, because the Eagles have 13 wins. Meanwhile, for Seattle, it's a major setback for their playoff push. Really going to hurt them because they're a fringe playoff team right now. Up next, we have the Indianapolis Colts falling to the Minnesota Vikings 39-36. It was Indianapolis dominance, followed by a complete collapse, and Minnesota just sheer resilience and fight and dominance in the second half. It was the largest comeback in NFL history, a 33-point comeback. Meanwhile, Indianapolis collapsed. It's the end of the Colts. Goodbye. You're eliminated. Meanwhile, for Minnesota, they clinched the NFC North. They're still fighting for the 1 seed too. So, granted, the 1 seed could be clinched next week, depending on how Philadelphia does. But Up next, we have the Baltimore Ravens falling to the Cleveland Brownies 13-3. Baltimore struggled. They had no offensive effort without Lamar, and Cleveland just took advantage. Their defense was able to suffocate and do what they needed to do. And they're still fighting for a playoff berth. They're on the fringe, but it is mathematically possible, but it's very unlikely. But they are trying. Meanwhile, Baltimore, they are falling from the AFC North lead. And it's going to be a dogfight for the rest of the year. But this loss right here could cost them the AFC North. Up next, we have the Miami Dolphins losing to the Buffalo Bills 32-29. Miami played well. They played close. They had the lead a lot. But Buffalo was able to come back and just barely edge out the game at the end. Buffalo was able to clinch a playoff berth, and they are still fighting for the 1 seed as it stands. They can also clinch the AFC East next week. And Miami is now in trouble. They might miss the playoffs with where they're sitting at. They're only 1 game in the playoffs. So, things could change. Up next, we have the Atlanta Falcons falling to the New Orleans Saints 21-18. New Orleans was able to come out strong, and they clung on as the Falcons fought back. New Orleans is fighting to win the NFC South as they are only 1 game back, same with everyone else in that division, of the Buccaneers. Meanwhile, Atlanta, they looked alright. They had Desmond Ridder at quarterback for the first time, and it didn't go hatefully bad, all things considered. But then let's go ahead and move on to our next game. The Pittsburgh Steelers beating the Carolina Panthers 24-16. Pittsburgh was always 1 step ahead of Carolina in this game. I don't even think Carolina ever held a lead once the Steelers got on the board. I don't believe so. Pittsburgh was still clinging on to playoff hopes, but it is highly unlikely that they make it, given the current situation of things in the AFC. Meanwhile, Carolina, they're still alright. I mean, they're just not, they have a chance at the playoffs, is what I should say, because that NFC South is just garbage. They're only 1 game out, despite the loss. And up next, we have the Philadelphia Eagles beating the Chicago Bears 25-20. Philadelphia was able to keep one step ahead of Chicago, but they didn't dominate like everyone thought they would. Philadelphia can clinch the number 1 seed next week, depending on how the way things go. And Chicago also has nothing to play for, but they were able to fight hard and show, hey, we probably want to lose this game for draft pick, but hey, we're going to fight. And they showed that fight. Up next, we have the Kansas City Chiefs just barely edging out the Houston Texans in overtime. Kansas City was able to outlast Houston despite the efforts of a win by Houston. Houston had nothing to play for but pride, and they are hungry for a win. You don't want to be a one-win team in the NFL at the end of the season. That just sucks. Meanwhile, Kansas City is still alive for the number 1 seed, and they also win the AFC West this week. So, congratulations to them. They're guaranteed in the playoffs. Whoop-de-doo. Up next, we had upset of the week that upset PDF. The Dallas Cowboys falling to the Jacksonville Jaguars in overtime, 40-34. Dallas started out strong, but then they choked it. They had the game in the bag, and they collapsed. Meanwhile, Jacksonville staying alive in the hopes for the NFC South, only now 1 game back of the Titans. So they legitimately could make a playoff run this year. Meanwhile, Dallas, they clinched the playoffs because of everyone else, but they still just looked awful. Awful. I don't have faith in them right now as it stands. Up next, we had a really good game. The Detroit Lions just barely edging out the New York Jets 20-17. And if you weren't there for the stream on Sunday, man, you got to go check that thing out. I will leave a link up in a card at some point near the end of the video. Make sure you check it out, because that was a great stream to watch. I mean, I was sitting there. It was one of the best games I've ever watched in my life. Watching 2 teams duke it out for a playoff spot, especially towards the end of that game. But anyway, Detroit was able to outplay and cling on versus the New York Jets. Meanwhile, keeping their playoff hopes alive as the Jets are struggling. They're going to have to now, they're on the outside looking in. They need to gain a game over a couple other teams in order to make it in. In fact, if I pull it up right now, as it stands, the Jets are tied with the Patriots, but the Patriots have the tiebreaker. So they need to gain a game over the Patriots and either the Dolphins or the Chargers. So not looking good for them. Up next, we have the Arizona Cardinals falling to the Denver Broncos 24-10. It was a close game that Denver just blew open in the 4th when was able to get ahead. Meanwhile, Arizona is, for sure, they're definitely a one-hit wonder now. Looking back at last year, they were a one-hit wonder in the NFL. Even people might say, oh, but they didn't have Murray. But still, 4 wins with Murray. Out of how many games? Out of 12? That's a one-hit wonder, my dude. Meanwhile, the Broncos, just trying to see what they can salvage from the Russell Wilson experiment. It's not been going well for them, though. Up next, we got the New England Patriots falling to the Las Vegas Raiders by an incredible end-of-regulation defensive fumble return for a touchdown by the Raiders. It was a tight game with a thrilling ending. I mean, like I said in the stream, this week was one of the best weeks of football we have seen in a long time. New England still fighting for their playoff lives. This is a major setback now as they are on the outside looking in, needing to pick up a game on either the Chargers or the Dolphins. Meanwhile, the Raiders eliminated, but they're playing tough. They are playing tough, trying to see what they can get going for next year. Up next, we have the Tennessee Titans falling to the Los Angeles Chargers 17-14. It was a low-scoring defensive struggle throughout that the Chargers were able to escape. Now Tennessee, they could still miss the playoffs. They are at 7-7. The Jaguars are at 6-8. So realistically, I mean, you're looking at it where the Titans are they're struggling. Struggling. So that's the way it stands. But the Chargers now in the picture, they can make the playoffs. They are on the inside now, looking out. So, good news for them. Up next, we got the Cincinnati Bengals beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 34-23. And it was all Tampa Bay early, but Cincinnati made adjustments and were able to come back from a 17-point deficit. Tampa Bay is still fighting for the NFC South. They could miss the playoffs. They are sitting right now at 6-8. The rest of the NFC South, the Panthers, the Falcons, the Saints, all 5-9. So, realistically, the way things are looking, the Saints, Falcons, Panthers, they all could win that division with a couple weeks to go. And Cincinnati is now fighting for the number 1 seed, only one game back of the Bills and Chiefs. So, big news for them. And last but not least, we have Sunday Night Football between the New York Giants and the Washington Commanders. Now, this was an all New York Giants game, but the Commanders had a chance to win it at the end. But the refs stole it away by telling Terry McLaurin, "Hey man, you're good where you're sitting at. You're in a good position to start." And then calling a flag saying that he was improper, like, I can't remember the term offhand. I'm drawing a blank on it, but you guys know what I mean. Looking at it being illegal formation. They were saying he was in illegal formation, and then they threw a flag saying he was in an illegal formation. The New York Giants revitalizing their playoff hopes, now a game ahead of the Commanders, and a game up in the playoffs. A game and a half, actually. Meanwhile, Washington should still be alright. They're a good team right now. They got to readjust this week, and they'll be fine. They should be fine if they play out right. But this game couldn't be the one that makes them miss the playoffs. But yeah, I guess as that stands right now, I guess we'll just take a quick look at the playoff picture at the way things stand, and then we'll call that a video here. So for the AFC, at the number 1 seed, we have the Buffalo Bills. Number 2, Kansas City. 3, Cincinnati Bengals. 4, Tennessee Titans. 5, Buffalo Bills. 6, Chargers. 5 Ravens. 6 Chargers. 7 Dolphins. I think I got that right. For the NFC, we got number 1, Eagles. Number 2, Vikings. 3, 49ers. 4, Buccaneers. 5, Dallas Cowboys. 6, Giants. 7, Commanders. The Jets and Patriots are both one game out in the AFC picture, and the Seahawks and Lions are one game out, or half a game out in the NFC picture. So that's your little playoff update, and I guess we'll see you guys tomorrow with Power Rankings. Peace out, and have a good one.